Kids, today I want to talk about mental illness and what it's like to live with mental illness. I've been trying for the last several months to make this video. And since I live with multiple mental illnesses, it's a lot harder for me to do these videos than it used to be. Excuse the ums. So here goes. I got asked a while back, what is it like, from a total stranger online, what is it like to live with a mental illness? And I had to think about it because I don't know what it's like not to live with a mental illness, I guess, theoretically, because supposedly I've had this for a very long time. So I don't recall what it's like not to live with it, but I'll tell you what it's like to live with it, as opposed to what I've heard other people describe their life as. So I hope this makes sense, and I hope it helps me, and I hope it helps somebody else that watches. So buckle up, it's going to be a long video, but here goes, because I have multiple mental illnesses. So first of all, I'll give you my diagnosis. I am schizoaffective bipolar disorder with complications. So that means I'm schizophrenic, I have bipolar disorder, and I have other complications. Now the other complications are, I have anxiety disorders, I had panic disorders, I have seasonal affective disorder, I have adopted child syndrome, and I have PTSD. So yeah, lots of things. So let's go into like the most intense, and then we throw in one more thing. I also have, what I believe I have is some sort of paranormal ability, and I've had this since I'm about 9, and I got it when my great-grandmother died. The night she died, she came and visited me. So you have to throw that into the mix too. Now, a lot of people like to just write that off as just part of my schizophrenia, but I can verify things, on occasion, that I would have no way of knowing. So how do you explain that? That's not just schizophrenia, but I get this. Let's start with schizophrenia. That's the big scary one that everybody thinks is so scary. Schizophrenia, for me, at least, it's not on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Schizophrenia, normally for me, is something that turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off, turns on throughout the day. Every day, no matter what. No matter how many medicines I take, regardless, at some point, at least once a day, but usually multiple times a day, I'll have a visual hallucination and an auditory hallucination. Both together, both separately, there's no rhyme or reason. Schizophrenia just is no rhyme or reason. Now, it almost feels, I don't know if you ever watched the movie Sybil, but it almost feels like there's like several different people inside of you, and they all take turns talking and telling you things about yourself. Good things, bad things, critical, good job, blah, blah, blah. But they just keep yapping a lot. Yap, yap, yap. So it's distracting, and it makes my mind go blank sometimes. And other things make my mind go blank, so I never know what that is. Sometimes I feel like it's dementia. Now, you have to understand, when they start medicating you as a mentally ill person, it changes the atmosphere, it changes the landscape of what you thought you knew, and it adds this whole like dreamlike quality, or this like floating-like quality to your life, because the chemicals they use for these mental drugs are very different wildly. So you can have wildly different reactions to things. For example, I took one medicine for a short time, and it made me hypermanic. And when I stopped taking the medicine, I dropped to the floor, and there was just, I wanted to kill myself, because I was never going to be able to feel that elation, that constant elation all the time, like I was feeling on that drug. But being constantly manic, was hugely dangerous, hugely expensive, and dangerous to my. It was affecting my health. I was getting fat, and my blood pressure was going up, and my diabetes was becoming out of control. So the drug was not good for me. I had to stop the drug. That's, there. So anyway, back to schizophrenia. I'm sorry for sidetracking. Schizophrenia. So you see things and you hear things, and you don't know whether you're awake or asleep, if it's real or if it's just a hallucination. So I've kind of compartmentalized my life into 4 compartments. I have the normal, the abnormal, the paranormal, and the sleep realm. So 4. Normal. Normal is your normal waking self, without hallucinations or paranormal. Just regular, fact-based. I woke up today and the sun's rising and the birds are singing and there's really birds there singing things. You know what I'm saying? There's real grass growing on the ground. Abnormal is when you're awake and you start seeing things that aren't there for everybody else. Or they're just not, for me, they're usually nonsensical. Or you start hearing things that no one else is hearing. Or you hear that talking in your head, those other voices in your head that keep yapping at you, distracting. That's the abnormal. Now the paranormal is interesting because it can happen both awake and asleep. Paranormal is when you're dealing with something that's there, that's like a spirit or a ghost or whatever you want to call it, or whatever it manifests itself as. And the difference between that and abnormal is that paranormal also has a physical aspect. You can get hit, or you can bang into it, or you can get scratched, or something physical. It can happen when you're awake, and it can happen when you're asleep, because certain entities or ghosts or relatives that are dead or whatever, like they'll come and hijack your dreams. And when they hijack your dreams, you know that they hijack your dreams because it doesn't feel like it's your dream anymore. And suddenly it doesn't feel organic. It feels like somebody's inside. And they hijacked your dream and they're trying to screw with your mind. So then you have to beat them out of the dream, or you have to wake up or do something to get them out. It's like a possession. Now, during the daytime, or when you're awake, the awake phase of paranormal, you see things, you hear things, they talk to you. A lot of times you can verify what they say. Just verify it. You can talk to a relative of theirs and say, pass on a message, or they can tell you who they were and where they came from, and you can Google it, and suddenly, yeah, you were in that plane crash 25 years ago. I'll be damned. And you live in Tennessee, and you're walking through my house. You're dead. You're trying to get home. And you're pissed. You didn't realize you died in the plane crash. I mean, stuff like that happens. So that's paranormal. And then sleep is this whole world that's also affected by the medications you take. That you have this whole life when you're asleep that you deal with things. You have dreams and stuff. They can be very vivid, very long, very dramatic, very intense, very gory or graphic or violent or whatever it is, happy, funny. There's a whole life you live when you sleep. If you're aware of, if you've trained yourself to be aware of your dreams and to enjoy being asleep, to enjoy that life, to enjoy it like it's another phase, like a awake phase. And that's how I live my life, to try to keep as much sanity as I can. Now, in order to do this, I not only take medication, but I verify with people around me, and I'm not particularly shy about saying, oh, hi, my name's Michael, I'm totally crazy, I have schizophrenia, and by the way, did you see that, or is that just me having a hallucination? Or you know, there's a ghost standing behind you, and this is what they look like, and this is what they're saying. I have no problem doing that. Um, it can be very off-putting and make people very uncomfortable. Um, but I have to be organic and natural, be myself, and I have to keep a good sense of humor about it, because some people get really uncomfortable around me, really uncomfortable, to the point where they don't want to be around me, and they'll avoid me at all costs. But I'm not dangerous yet, that I know of. So, you know, what can you do besides try to be real? I could try to lie about it, but eventually it's going to come out, because I think about things and talk about things that most people don't. And I just don't even realize that I do that, because it's just me. It's my life. You know? So, being schizophrenic, just the word scares people. The reality of all that talking and seeing and stuff, I use this thing, and it's for all mental illnesses, and it's also for physical illnesses, because your physical self can also affect your mental health. And then you throw in, you know, medications and stuff like that, you can really just strike up the band, so to speak, because every little thing is like an instrument in an orchestra, and it's always playing, whether you're asleep or you're awake, always playing. And if you don't check yourself and ground yourself, you get swept away by the river. And the easiest way to do that is get full of yourself in an ego sense, and you will easily get swept away in the river. That's something I learned the hard way. So I try not to get swept down the river, you know, very often. And I've left, hopefully, I'm like doing this video, I'm leaving a tree to grab onto, just in case I'm in the river sometime and I'm getting swept away. I can bring myself back, or hold on and pull myself back to shore. So if that makes sense. But you can get swept away if you don't check yourself. If you don't verify if what you're seeing is real or not as a schizophrenic, then you might believe something's going on that's not really there, and you will react accordingly. And if you're very full of yourself and you take yourself way too seriously, that can lead to very inappropriate or strange behavior or dangerous behavior on your part, or on, you know, the part of other people. So you have to really be careful. And that's the only thing I can say about that. And it's not easy. It's a full-time job. I mean, it's an around-the-clock full-time job. Now, I also have bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar disorder has this, you know, it's, you know, very chic to have bipolar disorder. Everybody's got bipolar disorder. Anybody that has a temper tantrum or gets pissed off has bipolar disorder. That's not the case. Bipolar disorder is, at least in my experience, is something that is not easily controlled. Actually, it's really not. Even with medication, it's not really controlled. You'll moderate it to an extent, but unless you understand it, and unless you're really in tune with your body, it's very easy to get swept away by bipolar disorder, and particularly in a manic phase. Because manic phase is when everything's great. You're the king of the world, you feel good, you're super funny, you have all the energy in the universe, you're hypersexual, you want to spend all your money, you want to party hardy, take drugs, drink, whatever, anything and everything. You are the king of the world. You own the universe. That is so dangerous. And you also feel this elation, this elation that just gets you so full of yourself, and it's just this high. But what happens when it stops is you crash, and it can be so devastating that's when a bipolar person is most likely to be suicidal, unless you're expecting to crash. And even then, you still feel like you want to, you know, sometimes you want to put yourself off. I personally don't, not in my paradigm, but I've had that feeling that I knew that I could if I wanted to. But like I said, it's not in my paradigm. Now, depression, when a bipolar is depressed, it's not that serious. And it sounds weird, but it's not, because when you get really depressed, and I get morbid depression, you shut down. You're so listless and so useless. Like, you don't even have you can't even keep an idea in your mind long enough, or have the desire or the physical ability to kill yourself. You just don't care. You can't move. It's just, it's like it's like being covered in lead. You just, you're there. Nothing. It feels like nothing's ever going to bring you out of this. It's just awful. You just want to lay there. And you get to the point where after you've slept so much, you can't even sleep anymore. So then you have to endure awake. It's horrible. But not nearly as dangerous as being manic. For me, I'm very in touch with my body, because my body, I have lots of other things going on physically besides my mental illnesses, and they all kind of interact, particularly when it comes to my anxiety disorders. But and my diabetes also brings on anxiety. So, but when you have a mood swing, let's say, people talk about mood swings in bipolar disorder. When you have a mood swing, it's like you could be standing in a supermarket, and suddenly somebody will say something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be even directed at you or have anything to do with you, but you'll hear a word, for example, and just the tone of that word coming out of that person's mouth that you don't even know, that has nothing to do with you, just listening to them speak that word in the particular tone they chose to speak it in will just send this electric bolt through your body. And these glands will squeeze, and you just feel your head fill with this chemical, and you become enraged. I mean, enraged, and indignantly enraged. And the most common thing that happens is, and particularly this is sad, but it happens with people that you're close to, is you will lash out verbally and say the most hateful things that you can possibly say. And being manic depressive, you're usually very in tune, so that you know what's going to hurt, and you know how to say it to make it hurt as bad as possible. But you can also do it in public to somebody, or you can basically get on your proverbial soapbox and start giving a very, very stern lecture. And it's horrible. And in extreme circumstances, it leads to physical violence. And that, or just by the virtue of you saying that to somebody who's very egocentric, they can attack you physically for opening your mouth. And then it becomes a physical altercation. And the worst thing you want to do with somebody that's bipolar is start fighting with them when they got all these chemicals flushing through their brain, because they get superhuman power, and they get these really dark, disgusting thoughts about how to kill you. For example, like, I could pull my partial out of my mouth and slit your throat with it without you even realizing I had a weapon on you, because it's stuck in my mouth. I mean, those are the kind of things that go through your mind when your rage is the bipolar. Now, when you've had that moment, let's say you have it at the supermarket, and now you've gotten out of that exact, the big reveal, so to speak. So now you walk to your car and you're still pissed. You get in your car and you drive home and you're still pissed. Get in the house, you're still pissed. 5 hours later, you're watching TV and you're still pissed about the same thing. And you wake up the next morning and you're still pissed. And you know there's no reason to be pissed. But it's just this chemical in your brain, and it hasn't flushed, your kidneys haven't flushed it out. It's the same thing with depression. It's the same thing with mania. You just have to be aware. And I call them the little glands, and each one has a different feeling, and I can always tell which one's squeezing because I know what's going to happen. And it's just a matter of enduring it. And sometimes you just want to peel your skin off to get away, because you know you just got to sit there with whatever it is, anger or mania or depression, and just wait for it to cycle out of your body. And it's just maddening. Now, you put that together with, let's say, your schizophrenia, and you've got talking, and then you've got like 7 or 8 different what I call personalities inside of you just talking away, telling you, good things and bad things and all this, crazy shit. And then, in my case, maybe, some ghost walks by and says hi or whatever. It just adds to the circus. When anxiety, with anxiety can be acute. You can just suddenly get really anxious. And it'll last for maybe an hour or something, and your body will just flood with anxiety chemicals, and then you're just exhausted afterwards. Or you can have what I call the slow burning anxiety that can last days and days, and you're just hand wringing constantly. You're just anxious. It's again maddening, and it's very stressful. It's just stress. Now, panic attack is a totally different monster. A panic attack is acute. It is severe, and it is right now. And it won't last forever, but it'll feel like it is right now, and it is wow. Like, suddenly you'll get this fight or flight response in your brain, like your lower brain, for no reason. And I'll give you an example of one. There was a van parked down the street from my house 2 years ago, and for some reason I just thought that it was like the CIA or something coming to get me. And I just knew they were coming to get me. It was totally irrational. It was a van that a neighbor had called, it was a plumber. But since it was a strange van in my neighborhood, for some reason it just set me off, and I went into this total panic mode. And all these weird thoughts started running through my head. And like, all these, they're going to come to get me, they're coming to get me, they're coming to get me. And I ran into my bathroom, and I got into my shower, and I curled up in the fetal position, and I just shook like a chihuahua, just so scared. And it lasted about 2 hours, and the whole time that this was happening, and all these things, these crazy thoughts were running through my mind, I was also conscious and saying, what is wrong with you? Get a grip on yourself. Jesus, nothing's going on. They're still not here. It's been 20 minutes. If they were going to invade your house, they would have already done so. You're being irrational. But my body still had all these chemicals, so it wasn't going to let go until the kidneys flushed out the chemicals. And kidneys work, the chemicals, depending on what the chemical is, can last an hour or two, or it can last a couple of days. Sometimes even longer than that if it keeps like the slow burn, like I call, like with general anxiety, it's just like this slow, stressful burn. So you're always pumping a little bit of adrenaline into your system constantly. So then by the end of the day, you absolutely are exhausted and you fall asleep into like this coma-like sleep. And then you wake up and it starts again. And that can be really annoying. So you have to work, I have to work on that. Adopted child syndrome is this unnatural need to be accepted and to please. Not just to be accepted and not just to please, to be accepted and to please, to be pleasing. So you will move heaven and earth to do those things. You will buy people cars and, like I said, move mountains for anyone at any time just to be pleasing, to feed this unnatural need you have because you were adopted. And it's the weirdest thing. And it's very hard to get control over because a lot of people really like that. They like being treated special. They like being listened to. They like when you move mountains for them. They like when you surprise them with romantic gifts or buy them cars or houses or pay for their education or whatever you do. They love it. So it's very hard to control. It's kind of like being manic. Because people really like that. So they encourage it. And that's a Venus flytrap. It's very self-destructive. So then I have seasonal affective disorder, which basically is a seasonal thing. It goes with the seasons of the year. And during the dark season or the winter, you shut down kind of like a bear and go into hibernation. and you want to sleep long periods, 14, 16, 18 hours a day, you literally start to hibernate. So you don't have any energy. And then in the summer, you're bounding around and it's hard to get to sleep. So, because it's light all the time. So that's how that works. And it's difficult at best. It's difficult. The only thing you can really do with seasonal affective disorder is put full spectrum lights in your house and just be aware that you have it, because otherwise you're just along for the ride. Now, if you take all of those things that I just told you and you put them all together at once, you can imagine what kind of noise and craziness goes on in my head every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't get away from it when I'm sleeping. I don't get away from it when I'm awake. Just don't. Now add physical illnesses. I have diabetes. Now, when I have anxiety, I sweat. When I have like a panic or like an anxiety moment, I start to sweat. If I have low blood sugar, I start to sweat. If I'm hot, I start to sweat. So my mind, every time I start to sweat, regardless of why I'm sweating, I automatically go into my anxiety phase. And I also go into this survival mode, because I've gotten low blood sugar before, and that's a sign of low blood sugar, and you start to shake and you sweat and you get very confused. So automatically, whenever I sweat, regardless of why I'm sweating, I go into this, survival mode and anxiety at the same time. And it shuts off everything else around me. And it's completely consuming. Seriously. So that, and then it raises blood pressure. So, for example, the other couple of weeks ago, I discovered that I had an addiction problem. So I stopped drinking alcohol. And I stopped drinking alcohol, and then I discovered I had an addiction problem because I started having extreme withdrawals. So when you have a physical withdrawal from like alcohol, your body it produces this chemical that was counteracting the alcohol, which raises your blood pressure. When your blood pressure, and I have high blood pressure already, which makes your ears ring, and if it's too high, it makes your ears scream. And it gives you splitting headaches and stuff like that. And the splitting headaches feel just like the bipolar disorder when you're getting angry, when that little gland squeezes. It's just that same splitting, lightning feeling. And then that screaming or that ringing in your ears, depending on how loud it is, it's there like a siren over the voices from schizophrenia and everything else going on all at once. So suddenly you just have, it's just overwhelming. You just want to just tear your skin off and run away, as fast as you can, because you know that there's nothing that's going to stop it. No matter how much medicine you take, you're going to have to sit and endure this until the blood pressure lowers and the anxiety stops, and it's a vicious circle that will keep going, and you have to break it. It's not easy. It's like juggling a whole bunch of shit all at once. I mean, it's like juggling your house and your car and your swimming pool and 3 balls and the cat and the dog, and just chaos in your mind constantly. So that's what it's like to live with mental illness. It's chaotic, and it's very complex, and it's very interwoven into everything in your life. Everything, every aspect of your life. And then you have your life history. For example, I'm a rape survivor, so I have PTSD about that. And certain things will set that off. And I have certain reactions to, like, sexual situations. I'm very, I'm not passive. I don't give up control anymore, because I was brutally raped twice. So when you put me in that kind of situation, I suddenly become very aggressive, and not necessarily in a nasty way, but in a way that I cannot just relax and enjoy. It becomes a chore. It becomes a mission. I'm going to satisfy you, and then we can stop this. And so if you're not used to it, it can be very gooky. Um, and that happens with all different kinds of things in my life. All different kinds of things. So, as we're getting a half an hour here, I'm going to stop talking. But I really wanted to make this video to give people an idea and about what it's like to live with mental illness. And I hope I get to watch this and it helps me sometime when I lose myself or I get dementia. And I hope if anybody else ever decides to watch it, that maybe it'll give them an idea, or hopefully if you're a mental health professional, maybe you'll learn to shut up and listen a little bit more before you foist an opinion on someone, because usually it's a lot more complex than your simple textbook answers that you've learned how to vomit up to mentally ill people. So if you don't know, if you're not suffering from it, it's kind of like rape. You shouldn't really be talking about it. So that's all for today. Thanks for listening, and talk to you later.